Make sure to subscribe to the Volume YouTube channel so you can catch all of our shows and get what everybody wants, more of me. All right, a couple times a year, I'm lucky enough to talk to Al Michaels. I've said this before, that the two or three broadcasters in my life that had formed some sort of personality for me were Howard Cosell when I was 8, maybe Costas and Al Michaels when I was 18. And I always start saying this, Al, you were the best baseball play-by-play guy that I'd ever heard. Of course, people in Los Angeles, Vin Scully's almost Shakespearean in his reverence, right? And Vin really is remarkable. It's almost literature on radio. But it's interesting, Al, you made a pivot to football. My first job out of college, you did the Hawaii Islanders, I did the Las Vegas Stars. So I was a baseball guy.
Right.
And Vegas changed me. I could bet on football. I loved betting on football. And I wasn't a huge NFL fan as a kid. I was a college football, baseball guy. You made a pivot, much like Tiger Woods changing clubs at the height of his game. You were the best baseball guy. And you said, I'm going to go to football. And you were doing both. But that was not, at the time, was there a moment you went, what am I doing here? Or what did you do it with conviction?
So, Colin, basically what it amounted to is I cut my eye teeth in baseball. Loved baseball, did the Hawaii Islanders, did the Cincinnati Reds, Big Red Machine, Bench, Rose, Morgan, Sparky, Perez. Went to the Giants because they tripled my salary for 3 years. Went to ABC and did all 14 years of Monday Night Baseball. Before that ended, they put me on Monday Night Football. So in 86, 87, 88, and 89, I was doing both. But I loved, and still do, baseball. And I was shattered when we lost the rights to baseball going into the 1990 season. So by that time, I was already doing the NFL. I had done a lot of college football as well at ABC. So it wasn't a matter of voluntarily giving up baseball. I desperately wanted to do it. But I was at a place, ABC, that did not have the rights from 1989 on, except for a couple of years when we shared some baseball coverage with NBC at the old baseball network. And that was it. So the last baseball game I did would have been in 1995 when I did the 5th game of the World Series between Atlanta and Cleveland. And I had a feeling that would be it. And I did one other game with Bob Costas at the park in San Francisco for the baseball network back in 2011. But that was the last time I did baseball. And I truly missed it. I mean, it was a big gaping hole in my heart in a way. But then, I just got used to it. So it wasn't a matter of wanting to pivot from baseball to football. It was a matter of I had no choice because ABC just didn't have the rights.
It's interesting. I did a few games in Hawaii, play-by-play in Aloha Stadium. And our vantage point, and I imagine yours was similar, was like up.
Well, remember, you did Aloha Stadium, which they built when I left. I was at a place called Honolulu Stadium, hard by Waikiki on the other side of the Alawai Canal, and we used to call it Termite Palace. So that's where I did my minor league baseball games at the old Termite Palace, which was a jury-rigged place that they'd added like 300 seats every 8 years and had a capacity of 20,000. It was also the football stadium, and that hosted any number of hula bowls and the University of Hawaii football games and high school football.
Okay, here's my one Aloha Stadium. So it had kind of a washed out turf by the time I did a game there. I'm like 22 years old, 23. And I'm with an older gentleman named Dom Valentino, rest in soul.
I knew him, yes.
Yeah, yeah. Dom was quite a character. So Dom had failing eyesight by the time, I'm this kid out of college, and he took me under his wing, and he had done A's games, I think Yankees game for a year. He was, by this time, 50s. And I learned a trick from Dom. Broadcast with great conviction, regardless of what happens. And there was a ground ball as we were elevated. We thought. You could not tell with a washed-out turf. And it actually ended up, Dom Valentino's call he got a little lost. He said, here's the 2-2. We had a very guttural sound. 2-2, ground ball to short, and it's gone. It is a 2-run blast. And he never paused for 1 second.
No, just make it sound good. I know. And it's so funny because you mentioned, because I remember I didn't get to do minor league baseball there, but I went back any number of times because I was doing the Pro Bowl for a number of years when I was at ABC and even at NBC. And I know about that washed out turf because, somebody got paid a lot of money to put in a piece of garbage carpet in there. And remember that turf looked like, to me, it looked like the rug in a seedy, like $6 a night motel is what it looked like. Not the Motel 6. Even these Motel 6 now charges you like $60 a night, but a really, really seedy hotel. I remember that turf very well.
So, do you prep, Al? You have a very conversational tone to begin with. Has your prep changed? A few years ago, I've always given every show 2 hours of prep, but I will say that it's gotten easier over time, just simply because I've done it so often. And there are days I can do an hour prep on a Monday during the NFL season. It's just easier for me. Or is your prep still remarkably similar to when you were 27 years old?
I would say it's even more intense, Colin. And the reason is the internet. The fans now know a lot. They didn't know before the internet. They didn't have access to it. So before the internet came about, and all of the talk shows and other newspaper availability around the country, the fans could not know a lot of what you knew. Now they know a lot of what you know, and I've got to go deeper into that. And also, we live in this kind of like, not that I pay that much attention to it, but we're kind of in the gotcha world, where if you make a mistake, what's he talking about? Get rid of this guy, blah, 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 whatever. I mean, we know what that's like, that anti-social media nonsense that's out there. But I have found that I do more work than ever right now, just to come up with some of the nuggets that I know because of our access to coaches, owners, players, personnel people, etc., people who really understand the league, that the average fan can't know about. And I think that's the type of thing that really stands out in a telecast. I know one of the things that when we had Arizona a few years ago, and one of their assistant coaches had been an assistant coach in Super Bowl I in Los Angeles. This was like 50 years later. And people the next day would say, wow, what a story that was. But that was the thing that, I was able to discover by talking to the right people and finding out and going back and researching what had happened in Super Bowl I. So, you're looking for things like that. But in terms of, preparing for a game, it's probably a 60-hour-a-week ordeal for me.
There's a John Madden documentary coming out here on Christmas for Fox. You've had a lot of great partners. And you work well with a lot of people. They put a comedian in the booth with you, and you made it work. Madden was so different, Al, in that I remember once reading an article that said, he hit you like a strong drink. He was just such a force of personality. Was it difficult? Because you knew that you've always been a guy that you navigate the play and then you set somebody up. John was different. There was a Barkley quality where he just didn't do it like anybody else. Was that easier or more difficult for you?
I had 7 wonderful years with John, and it was basically very easy. And one of the reasons was when John came to me in 2002 at ABC on Monday night, he had left Fox. And Pat Summerall was either going to retire or not be on the number 1 game. So it made it easy for John to come over. We had heard each other so much. I had heard John do hundreds of games. John was always in the bus after a Sunday game on Monday night. He'd heard me do hundreds of games. And I remember when we got together for the first time, and our producer, Fred Godelli, who's still my producer on Sunday night now, Fred said to us, do you guys want to do a practice game off tape, and we'll roll the tape and you guys can see where you are? And John looked at me because I was kind of the senior guy at that point. John's coming to ABC, and I'd been there X number of years. And I said, I don't think we need it. And then we walked out of the room, and John said, I'm glad you said that, because we both felt that it would have been artificial to sit there and try to figure out where we were in front of a monitor and calling a game in a studio, a fake game. So I know when John and I made our debut together in 2002 at the Hall of Fame game in Canton, by the time I got to the second commercial, I felt like I'd worked with this guy for 50 years. This was easy as pie. And we just had, I think, a genuine feel for each other's rhythm. And we had a great amount, I had a great amount of respect, obviously, for John. I think he did for me as well. And it made it so pleasurable and so fascinating. And I've said this before, Colin, I think one of the great things about John is that apart from the game itself, apart from when we were in a football world and we would just, be talking at dinner, he was a fascinating man, extremely well-read, curious about everything. And some of the greatest conversations I've had with John had nothing to do with football. I mean, he was a true Renaissance man, and is.
Yeah, it's. I love in the documentary. I saw a clip of it, and he said he had never thought about broadcasting, and then the minute he did it, he's like, he used to call all of us hairdos, and then the minute he did it, he knew it was perfect for him. So for a lot of people, Al, you and I remember him coaching. Mm-hmm. And I can remember like Jerry Tarkanian, it was the short sleeve dress shirt, kind of ill-fitting. If I said to somebody, do you remember his coaching style? If I said, hey, what was like Eric Coryell, Bill Walsh, because I don't necessarily, I remember him as a big flamboyant personality on the sideline yelling at referees. What was his coaching style? Do you recall?
Well, it was pretty much what the Raiders style was too, go vertical. And he had Kenny Stabler as his quarterback for the most part through those years. Yep. And they had a lot of speed, Cliff Branch and the rest. And they were a physical team. They had, the Matuzaks and the Longs and the guys who could beat you up basically. And so they were physical. They were exciting. The Raiders in those years, I would say, I would describe their games as exciting. They played not only winning football, but unbelievably entertaining football. And you go back through some of the games that John coached, and those are some of the most memorable games in the history of the National Football League, including, of course, the Franco Harris catch, no catch, which, of course, John has to live on the other side of. But he was a guy, and it's so funny you talked about, Jerry Tarkanian and maybe the short sleeve dress shirt. With John, to me, when I picture him on the sidelines, John was he had one of those paper credentials tied to his belt loop, as if he needed a credential to get into the Oakland Coliseum, right? But I loved it. There was John, larger than life, a guy who's going to go to the Hall of Fame as a coach, and he's got that little credential dangling from his belt loop. He was special.
You'll be doing a Super Bowl this year, another Super Bowl.
Correct.
And it's funny about these Super Bowls. The halftimes get longer. The broadcast day gets longer. But I think by and large, the league has done a really good job, Al, to always understand their sport is a television show, and I don't think other sports have necessarily understood that. The media critics in America, and maybe it's because print people by nature don't love big and powerful people, have hammered Goodell a lot, although I find him much more personable than Tagliabue, who was more the accountant, very dry. You've watched all these sports grow over the course of your life. You've seen some, like boxing and baseball, don't have the social currency, the water cooler currency they used to. Give me the moment you believe that football surpassed baseball in your mind, in America. Because as a kid growing up, it was 75 Cincinnati Reds, Garvey's Dodgers, it felt like to me as a kid in rural America, baseball was king. Did it change for you at a certain time?
It's a great question. And I don't think it changed overnight. I could feel it starting to happen in the 70s for whatever reason. All of a sudden, you stopped doing the blackouts and people in those cities could watch the games. I think by the early 80s, it became football. I think that's where football probably surpassed baseball. I think part of it, too, is the technology. Football televises so beautifully. I mean, all sports do right now, but you are in places that you couldn't imagine being in years ago. I mean, with that camera hovering above, behind the offense, with the sideline cameras, with the close-ups, with 4K and digital. I mean, I've just watched the evolvement of this, and every sport is now televised better and in a sense more beautifully. But football is made for television, just made for TV. And I remember having a discussion once with Jimmy Johnson. At that time, was coaching, I think, Miami. And we were in some cold weather city. Miami was on the road, and I was doing Monday night. And Jimmy and I are down the field just yakking a little bit an hour or so before the game. And we looked up into the upper deck and the end zone on a really cold and really bitter night, and trying to figure out why would anybody choose to sit up there when they could sit at home, and have a hot chocolate or whatever and watch the game on television. And Jimmy had a great line. I'll never forget it. He was describing the difference between television and being there. He said, on television, TV can make a 4-yard gain look like Armageddon. If you're sitting up there, a 4-yard gain is a 4-yard gain. It's as simple as that. And it's so true, because if you're sitting, in the upper deck, in the end zone, what do you see? I mean, there's a run over right tackle, 4 yards. But at home, you can see so many different aspects of that game. And the intertwining of that game with the commentary and what's happening and just the tapestry of the game is so different at home than it is in the stadium. So I think that had a lot to do with it. As I say, baseball is televised beautifully these days too, but football is the king. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact it is the perfect television sport.
So much has been made. I mean, you've had just this incredible career, and now it's going to be extended. Now, I don't keep up necessarily. I should do a better job of this on the trades. You are going to be, I'm hearing rumors about Thursday Night Football. Is that done officially?
No, it's not done. I mean, I know what's out there is my deal ends after the Super Bowl in February. And NBC is going to be very involved in the production of the Thursday night games, at least initially. So there's a little bit of a blending there. So I don't know exactly what's going to happen. And I've been able to, this year, Colin, really kept it over on the side because I'm enjoying this year so much. The games have been great. Love the people I work with, just love them to death. The greatest crew ever. And I'm so fortunate. And if you begin to think about other stuff, I think it takes away from the joy of what's going on at this point. And I hear people like Aaron Rodgers talking about savoring the moments, and you savor them when they happen. And I want to enjoy this year. And we've got the Super Bowl coming up, and we're doing 2 other playoff games. And Week 18, there's so much that's happened this year and look forward to, that if I start to drift over to what'll happen next year, I don't want to go there. I will say this: I love doing this, and I have no intention not to be doing football next year. I do want to do it.
Yeah, well, you do a pretty good job. Let's just say that. I think you're pretty good at the whole damn thing. So Musburger told me this once. So I was in the back of a car. We were getting driven to an event we were doing together for Toyota, if I recall. And, Brent, like you, when you hear a broadcaster and then you sit next to him in a car, you're at dinner with them, it's really funny. And I could hear Brent 3 feet from me. I just was waiting for him to say, "You're looking live at the steering wheel." He's, and I asked him, I said, "Jesus, Brent, you live in Billings or something. You got a game in Madison, Wisconsin. Do you ever just look at your schedule and it's just overwhelming?" He goes, "Colin, the next game is the only game I know." And I thought, that's the way to do it. Don't look at my schedule. What's the next day I'm broadcasting?
And that's very much what I'm thinking about in terms of this year. I want to just soak all of the pleasure I can out of this year. Next year will be next year. As I say, God willing, I stay healthy. I love what I do. And if the brain continues to, work in some semblance of normalcy, yeah, I do want to do it. I love doing it. I've always loved sports. I've been a sports fan since my father walked me to Ebbets Field when I was 6 years old. And, I've never lost my love and passion for sports ever.
I bet you know the players that played in that game, because I remember my first Mariner game with Frank Tanana on the mound. I can recite from Danny Meyer at first, Julio Cruz, Craig Reynolds, Bill Stein, Bob Stinson, Diego Segui, Lee Stanton, Rupert 2P Jones in center from the Tigers. I bet you can recite every player in your first baseball game.
So my first major league game was when I went to Cincinnati in 1971. And we opened up with Atlanta. And in those years, Cincinnati was given the opportunity to open up the season by themselves on a Monday as a standalone game because they were the oldest franchise. So it's Riverfront Stadium. I cannot believe I'm in the major leagues. I'm a kid in my mid-20s, came over from Hawaii. The town is looking at like, what the hell is this? They hired some kid from Honolulu to do what? Does he come with a lei around his neck? So the first batter in the game, first of all, the pitcher for the Reds is Gary Nolan, who was a very good pitcher. The first batter is Sonny Jackson. And Sonny Jackson was playing shortstop. The second batter was Ralph Garr, who had won 2 batting titles. And the third man up was a guy by the name of Henry Aaron. So it's a 1-2-3 inning. He's the third guy in my career that I called. The Reds come up. Phil Niekro is on the mound for Atlanta, so he would go to the Hall of Fame. Pete Rose leads off for us. Tommy Helms bats second. Johnny Bench third. Where do you go from there? There you go. That's your first inning. And by the way, Tony Perez is in the game. It's the year before Joe Morgan would come. He wasn't, but Sparky Anderson is the manager. He goes to the Hall of Fame. We had Davey Concepcion and people like that as part of that team. But what a thrill that was. That was just phenomenal. And I remember Sonny Jackson led off and he hit a ground ball to the hole on the right side between our first baseman, Lee May, and Helms is playing second base. And Tommy went to the hole, wheeled around, threw him out. I said, one pitch, one great play. That was my opening call of the first batter that I called back in 1971. Oh yeah,
that's remarkable.
Well, those are moments. I mean, those are lifetime moments that you cherish. And you think back and those are hard to forget. Really.
Here's something as a broadcaster that I think about. This is so odd. And in your years of listening to me, I'm sure you've never thought, how does Colin get home after the show? But I've thought about this with Al Michaels. I think he's not going to a hotel. He's getting on a plane and flying home. What do you do when the game is over? Do you come home that night?
Not from the Eastern or Central time zones. It's too late. I'm doing a night game. I mean, if I was doing a day game, yeah. No. If it's on the West Coast or the Mountain time zone, we do a rare game in the Mountain time zone. But if it's Denver, Phoenix before the time change, yes. But I've always tried to do that. And I married the right girl. Been married for over 50 years. And I think one of the reasons that it really worked is that even in my years at ABC, when I was doing Wide World of Sports and college football and a whole bunch of stuff, I would make it a point to get home as fast as I could. I felt it was very important. And I think my wife did too. And, it's for what it's worth. Here we are, going down the path, and it's been a long, long time. And I found the right, as I said, I found the right girl, and you can't get any luckier than that.
If I could, where'd you meet her?
10th grade, Hamilton High School, Los Angeles. I grew up in New York. We moved here when I was in the 10th grade, and she was in a class with me and we became friends. We weren't sweethearts. We were pals, and we had a whole collection of friends, and we always hung out together. And my house was kind of the clubhouse, because my mother was a combination of Phyllis Diller and Joan Rivers. My mother was the character of characters, and all of the kids loved to come to my house. And Linda was among those kids. And then when we were like 18 and we were both in college, and I went to Arizona State, she went to Cal State Northridge, and I came back into town. I said, why don't we go to a game or movie? I can't remember what it was. And, the good night little smooch became like a real smooch. Like, it's like, whoa, we kind of moved over a barrier here. And it was like, So, and off we went. We got married, and here we are.
Where's Hamilton High in LA at that time?
Where is Hamilton? Robertson Boulevard. Yeah, it's the same place. It's Robertson to the 10 freeway. Same. It's still there. Still there. Yeah.
I say this all the time. People complain about California. And listen, our tax rate is remarkably high. It is. But it's got Mediterranean weather and a nice breeze, and I don't like winter. And, it's funny. You didn't used to. I can remember as a kid growing up in the Pacific Northwest, people hated Californians because they'd move up and housing prices would go up because Californians are big consumers. They had good money, and they'd come and they'd buy all the nice Washington State homes, right? And I can remember my stepdad's like, oh, Californians are the pits. But one of the things as a kid growing up in the Northwest, I grew up with the Washington Huskies, Don James teams. Mm-hmm. And I loved USC. I was never threatened by California. I was fascinated by the Lakers. I can remember Elmore Smith and Don Ford and Happy Harrison. I loved the Lakers. To me, I couldn't afford Disneyland. We didn't fly as kids. Why have you remained in California? Because you're from here? You could have left. You could live right in the middle of the country. It'd be much easier, Al. Why have you remained here?
Well, I moved here when I was 14. Liked it a lot. Went to Arizona State, but back and forth. And then Linda and I got married here. And I started my career a year and a half later after we got married in Hawaii. Lived there for 3 years. Lived in Cincinnati for 3 years. Lived in the San Francisco Bay Area for 12 years, even though I only did the Giants for 3. Went to ABC, and we continued to live in Menlo Park, and our kids were raised there. Then we moved back in '86. We were kind of like, approaching a little bit of the midlife thing. And my father had died just before that, and Linda's mother had died. So we had the surviving parents, and both of our and all of our siblings were here, and other relatives. And we decided to move back to LA. And now we moved back here. And frankly, Colin, we've lived in the same house for 36 years. Part of the reason is when we think about moving, and we've thought about it from time to time, getting a bigger house, better house, what have you, the thought of having to go through all of my junk and collecting it is so anathematic that we have continued to live in the same place for 36 years. And we have no plans to move because the junk pile has just increased like 50-fold.
Do you have a piece of sports memorabilia that I would be surprised you have?
Oh, probably not. I mean, I've got some memorabilia, but nothing that would really stand out. I mean, I had a collection of Sports Illustrateds for about 25 years. They were in the house, but my wife moved those to public storage. So they're there, but they're no longer in the house. We had to make some room. And so I had to give up the Sports Illustrated in the house. But if I want to go down to public storage, if you want to come down with me someday, we'll go through the files and go through about 500 Sports Illustrateds.
Well, I'm glad I'm not the only person that had that. By the way, I always the great part about my stack, which my mom moved to the garage at some point, is I would keep a Playboy right in the middle of it in my teen years.
Hey,
Hey,
of course, who did?
you
Right?
you do what you do.
Right.
As we wrap this up, I'm not jealous of much. Like, I'm glad I chose the career path. I started in play-by-play. I went to local TV. I ended up in opinion, and I think it fits my personality. And I've been to every sporting event except the Kentucky Derby that I've wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
But I was trying to explain to somebody the other day, I said, there's one moment in my life that I would love for somebody to explain to me, that I wish I was there, and you were. And I remember watching the 30 for 30 from the Russian perspective on Miracle on Ice.
Right.
And Russian players saying, and this was a hardy group, saying, we were scared. And Al, we know about your call with you and Ken Dryden. Take me to the environment an hour before, an hour and a half before. Is it unique in your experience? Because it's a fairly small venue. Is it, in all your NBA finals and all your games, did it feel unique as a moment in time?
Well, you have to start with before the Olympics, what did you expect? And the expectation was that the U.S. team, if everything worked pretty well, would win a bronze medal. The Soviets were the best team in the world, bar none. The Czechoslovakian team, before that country broke up, Czechoslovakia, number 2, clearly. 3 would be U.S., Finland, Sweden, Canada, Germany, possibly. Okay. So the best case scenario was bronze. When I got the assignment, I was pretty happy about it because I actually wanted speed skating because Eric Heiden was expected to win 5 gold medals, and he did. And that would have been, I thought that was the premium event. I know I wasn't going to get alpine skiing because Bobby Addy and Frank Gifford loved the après ski scene, and they were friends with the boss. So that was out. So hockey, I loved hockey as a kid growing up in New York. And I was the one guy on that staff, which included Keith Jackson, Frank Gifford, Jim McKay, Howard Cosell, Chris Schenkel. I knew what offside and icing was. And I was the only guy who had ever done a hockey game. I had done one. So I get the assignment, and I'm happy about one thing. At the Winter Olympics, it's always good to have an indoor venue, right? I don't need a parka. I can go to work in a blazer. Now, the hotel in Lake Placid was maybe 4 blocks from the arena. So when it starts, the U.S. team the night before the actual opening ceremony, the U.S. team with 30 seconds to go in the game winds up with a tie against Sweden. Bill Baker scores a goal, and it's like, whoa, that's pretty good. That's not a bad start because Sweden was perceived to be a little bit better than we were. Now you get to the second game, we're playing Czechoslovakia, and we killed them. So it's like, wait a second, what's happening here? U.S. wins 7-3. Now they beat Norway, they beat Romania, and they beat Germany. So now they get to the medal round, and it's like, okay, they're going to play the Soviets, but they're going to get killed. And Ken Dryden and we'd been to the Soviet Union. We had watched that Soviet team play 6 or 7 games. We'd watched them in the Olympics. They just toyed with teams. And the conversation that Kenny and I had as we walked to the arena, probably at about 2:00 in the afternoon, because the game started at 5. So we're walking over to the arena. And I remember saying to Dryden, if it's only like 3-1 midway through the second period, it sounds close enough to keep an audience for a while. Right? Right. So now U.S. falls behind quickly, 1-0, look out, tie the game, fall behind 2-1. Mark Johnson gets the goal at the horn at the end of the first period. It's like, whoa. The second period is dominated by the Soviets. So now it's 3-2. So we're in the game. So this is much better than anybody anticipated. And then, of course, when the U.S. ties the game 3-3, and then Eruzione scores with 10 minutes to go, that was just insanity. And I remember thinking I just had to stay in the game, to stay in the moment, because now the crowd is going crazy. And we're on like a ramshackle platform in the front of what would be the second level, the balcony, small arena, like 7,000 or 8,000 seats. And it's shaking. It's going back and forth and up and down because there's so much stomping of feet and screaming. And of course, the truck is going crazy too. I got the producer in my ear screaming his guts out at me. And all I'm thinking about is, man, like a horse with blinkers, straight ahead, call the game, call the game, call the game, call the game. And I'm doing it. And now I'm thinking, the U.S. has a 4-3 lead. I mean, whoa. And now you want the clock to get to zero, but it's the clock looks like it's in quicksand. You keep looking up at the clock. The clock is like 6 minutes and 12 seconds. Next time you look up, you're hoping it's like 4 minutes, but it's like 6:02. So, I mean, only 10 seconds have gone by. And so now it goes down to the end. Jim Craig's making some great saves. The U.S. team, I mean, it's phenomenal what Craig did, the U.S. goalie. And as the game is coming to its conclusion, people said to me, did you think about that? Did I think about it? I thought that the Soviets would win the game 10-2. The puck came out the center ice with about 5 seconds to go. And there was no time for the Soviets to mount a new attack. And the word that came into my head was miraculous. Miraculous. And somehow it got morphed into a question and an answer. And then I just let it play for the next 45 to 60 seconds, I guess. So the reality of it is, Colin, that I didn't know exactly what I had said, but what the words that came out were from my heart. It was like, this is so great. This is a miracle. It's a sports miracle. It's not a miracle.
Right.
Miracle. You know what I'm saying? So when I said that was like the 10-year-old in me coming out. That had nothing to do with a preordained or thought about lobbies. If you think about what you're going to say, it sounds scripted. So, hey, listen, I got lucky because that was one moment in time. It was the greatest thing. It's the pinnacle of my career in the sense that nothing will ever supplant that for a moment. And, it's nice to be able to live with that as opposed to screwing it up and having to live with that for 40 years.
Did you know within 24 hours it was iconic, the call?
I did not. Not at all. Because you don't know how long things last. You don't know if things have, as they say, legs. I didn't. In fact, I wasn't sure exactly what I had said. So the game is right. The game is on tape. So Dryden and I, we had to stay and do the 8:00 game, Sweden, Finland, in case the tape machine broke. So everybody else is back at the hotel. And when I walked into the hotel and everybody's in the bar at like 11:15, we're finally done for the night. And everybody's celebrating and excited. And everybody would come up to me at the end and go, "Oh my God, that was great." And I'm thinking, yeah, I kind of think I remember saying something about a miracle, but I had no idea what they were really talking about until they kept playing it back to me, obviously, at that point. And I thought, yeah, I guess that's one way to put it. But, it's also, Colin, the thing you have to remember, too, is that if you're doing a Super Bowl or another game, you can't say something like that because, the crowd is half here, half there. There's a certain percentage rooting, for one team and a percentage for the other. This was the one time when 99.999% of the audience is going one way, and the only people going the other way are KGB agents.
Yeah, somewhere Alexander Solzhenitsyn was pissed off.
Right, exactly. And just one other addendum to that. Bob Verdi, who wrote for the Chicago Tribune, had one of the great leads of all time in the '84 Olympics. Fast forward, we go to Sarajevo, Yugoslavia. ABC puts a lot of eggs in the hockey basket thinking, can they do it again? Not that you could have ever recreated that to begin with. But we go there, and the first game for the U.S. team is against Canada. And they lose like 5-2. And Bob Verdi in the Chicago Tribune, his lead the next day was Dateline Sarajevo. Do you believe in debacles? Classic. Just great.
And we end it with that, Al, my friend. Yeah. Great seeing you. Great talking to you again. And hope you had a good round today at Bel Air. Take care, buddy.
I didn't, but this was a lot of fun. Anytime, Colin. You got it.